Welcome to the November webinar for the Remarkable Women Powerful Stories conversation. And it will be my great pleasure in a moment to officially welcome Renée Cutting to this broadcast this morning. I'm coming to you from Brisbane in Australia, and Renée is coming to us from Connecticut in the USA. So I'm Lynn Foley, Chairman of the Zonta International Leadership Development Committee, and today, again, a significant highlight on my calendar each month. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also pay that respect to any First Nations people present. Zonta International is a leading global organisation of professionals empowering women worldwide through service and advocacy. Zonta is now in its second century and has more than 28,000 members in 64 countries, working together to make gender equality a worldwide reality for women and girls. So now to formally introduce Renée, and thank you so much for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to have you in conversation with us. I'll just give a very short introduction to Renée because the rest of who Renée is and her career and professional achievements will cover those during our conversation. But Renée is currently the Chief Philanthropy Officer for UNICEF USA, where she's responsible for creating and implementing a cohesive, collaborative and unified fundraising program supporting the world's most vulnerable children. She came to UNICEF USA from work in the NAACP Legal Defence and Educational Fund, and behind that, lots of career achievements in universities and teaching and all sorts of things. And so I think, Renée, we just might let all of your career unfold before our participants today. What do you think? I particularly like the fact that you were an English instructor at Phillips Exeter, and of course you were a fellow, administration fellow at Harvard University, so and worked in the health field as well. So there's so many different facets to your career so far. So it'll be really interesting to see how they unfold as you tell your story today. So it is a fabulous pleasure, and it's a few weeks since Renée and I first met each other and talked about today. So Renée, welcome, and you're in Connecticut,
Thank
so
you.
I presume the weather's cooling off there at the moment?
It is, although today is a lovely 60 degrees. Tomorrow is going to be in the 40s. So I was able to get out and soak in a little end of the fall season before it starts to get bitterly cold here in the Northeast. But I am delighted to be joining you today, Lynn.
It's my pleasure. And of course, where I am in Australia, and I've just had a few weeks in Darwin in the far north of our country, and I was complaining about the humidity and the heat. So I guess we're on different sides of the world. So let's start today's conversation, Renée, with where and how did your story begin?
Well, first, Lynn, before I get into me, I just want to first express it's truly an honor to be here today. Thank you so very much for this opportunity, for asking me to speak about my personal journey as a woman leader, as a woman of color, the challenges that I face, the successes, and why I am here doing the work that I am doing. I would be remiss if I did not extend a heartfelt thank you and all of the women leaders from Zonta International for your dedication to women and girls, especially in these critical, trying times. Your generosity for almost 50 years of partnership with UNICEF. UNICEF is turning 75 this year. In a couple of weeks, we will be celebrating that 75th anniversary, and it's beyond inspiring to recognize that you all have been a part of this journey to create a sustainable change for children for such a large part of our history. And gender equity is near and dear to my heart, not only as a woman, as an employee of UNICEF, but also because I am a mother, and I'm a mother of a young girl who's turning 8 in 3 days, actually. But my story really begins in Barbados. I was born on a tiny island in Barbados, and how does a little Bajan girl end up as being the Chief Philanthropy Officer at UNICEF USA? And that's really because I was given tremendous opportunities. I also credit the fact that I had a great education, and I moved to from Barbados at the age of 12. And I moved to Southern California, South Central California. And it was a lot of people who poured a lot of love into me, who nurtured me, even although, I didn't have everything. I did have opportunities, and those opportunities were expressed through my teachers who supported me and who encouraged me. And it was due to that I was able to move to New York once my family moved, to get a great education at NYU and also at Harvard University, where I started to teach. And I did teach at Phillips Exeter Academy. It was my first job out of school. And truly just a transformational opportunity, because it opened up my eyes to what other forms of education look like. And although I do credit the tremendous education that I was able to get, it also opened up my eyes to the differences in accessibility and what that entails.
Yeah, so I know from our introductory talk, Renee, that you spent some years on Barbados, and then you did some part of your growing up in the USA directly, didn't you? So
yes,
be really interested to hear a little bit more about that. And also, what motivated you to choose your study path? Because I know you started in the field of the arts, so and then you went into your career step by step. But what motivated you to go down that pathway?
Well, I always, from a child, I always loved the spoken word. I always performed. I see it in my daughter in her little dance recitals. And it was just this ability to communicate. It was one of those God-given talents where you use your voice. And I realized at a very young age that I had a very persuasive voice, and I also love to act and perform. And that carried me through. So although moving from Barbados to Southern California was a major impact on my life, I still was able to maintain my love of literature and books. And books were my way to escape and go to a different journey in life. And that's why I chose to get my first degree, my undergraduate in English and American literature, and just being exposed to plays, whether it was, Waiting for Godot and the love of being in New York City and being exposed to, all English literature, both English and American literature. That's what prompted me to do that. And most importantly, it also gave me the opportunity to be analytical. And I think sometimes people just read a book, but I love to read a book and unpack and unearth the stories and the meanings and the hidden meanings behind it. And I also credit it to great teachers. And I remember when I was in undergrad and trying to figure out what was next for me, I went on a trip. I was part of the Martin Luther King Scholars Program. And one of our trips was to go to Senegal. And just going to Senegal, touching down in Africa, specifically going to Gorée Island, the point of no return. And I remember our guide says, obviously, they said this was going to be the point of no return for those individuals who went through the transatlantic slave migration, but we did return, and we returned as Martin Luther King scholars. And that trip had a profound impact on my trajectory as to what career I wanted to do. And I saw the kids, and those kids and the eyes of the kids were very similar to the kids that I was going to school with, riding the train with. And as a result, I chose to apply and get my master's in education because I wanted to give back and I wanted to make a difference for children.
So somewhere deep in your heart, is it that you've got, or some of your heart, or maybe all of it, you've got the heart of a teacher? I always say that, and maybe I'm saying that because that was my original career as well. Yes. But it's that heart of a teacher, and I know I'm often accused by my daughter of, oh, Mum, you're such a teacher. You just can't get over it, can you? Always having to show people new ways and different ways of doing things. So I'm hearing that from you. Is that somewhat of a truth?
That is definitely
some of your heart is in teaching?
I am always a teacher. I just had my team meeting. I have the honor of leading a dynamic group of professionals all over the US. So we're about 150. And I used it as an opportunity, especially as we're coming up on celebrating Thanksgiving, to really ask the team to stop and pause, listen to themselves, their accomplishments, listen to their colleagues, and really take the opportunity to express thanks and to have grace in life. And it's important that we do pause. And I also used it as a teaching moment to share with them some of the personal challenges that I encounter and how important it is to take care of yourself. And I feel that my role is to mentor and to lead by example, whether that is, leading a team or whether that is teaching a group of, high school students at Exeter or teaching them in Boston's Boston English School where I led. It's important that we show our authentic selves and that we continue to educate. And education comes in all different forms and shapes. And most importantly, how do I teach my daughter is what I'm grappling with as she's approaching this tender age of 8. And I know that my examples and the examples and the influences of others around her are going to have a profound impact on her life and, more importantly, the lives of others.
I remember meeting her when we were on Zoom recently, and we had a discussion about where Australia is in comparison to Connecticut, and a lovely young girl.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you the question. Do you think fundraising, did you think you found that whole part of philanthropy and fundraising as a career direction, or did it find you?
Definitely found me. So growing up, as I said, in South Central LA, I did not even know what philanthropy meant, even going to school, not being exposed to it. There are individuals, I always feel there are individuals in our lives who enter our lives for a reason. My colleague, Tom Hayford, from grad school, I was 21 and he was in his 40s, obviously had several different career paths, but he said to me after I had spent a couple of years teaching, he says, Renee, why don't you come and run this nonprofit organization that I founded in Boston? And I said, Tom, I'm like 22. I don't know anything about running a nonprofit organization, but he saw something in me just based on my experience of, being student body cabinet at grad school. And from there, that was my exposure to, wow, I could really run a program. More importantly, I could have events. I could meet with the head of Boston Gas and use that platform to really make a difference for over 220 students from Boston, Dorchester area. And that then was the launch pad. I then moved back to New York, and Julia McCormick, who was my real first professional head of major gifts at Memorial Sloan-Kettering. She hired me on the spot and the rest is history. So I would definitely say, no, I did not know about philanthropy, but definitely those individuals who were placed in my life opened up my eyes, and I try to also pay that forward as well.
You also spent some time working in the health area, in between teaching and your Harvard fellow work, etc. So you've had a very broad range of sectorial work, like going into different sectors, haven't you? So how does all that come together for you now that in fairly recent times you joined UNICEF USA? So what drew you to the UNICEF USA, because it is mostly about vulnerable children, from all of that you've done so far in your career?
Well, as I mentioned, my first real professional career as a fundraiser, as a major gift frontline fundraiser, was at Memorial Sloan-Kettering. And that was really based on my grandmother who passed away from cervical cancer. And I was very interested in cancer and working at a leading institution such as Sloan-Kettering. I also worked at the Ralph Lauren Center for Cancer Cure and Prevention, which was based in Harlem, really working with the most underserved community in the New York metro area to make sure that they have more positive and more access. So I've always used my role to not only connect with my community, but also to advance the important health issues that our society is facing. I also just recently, as you mentioned, came from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And as you can imagine, the pandemic has had a terrible impact across the world, and specifically through the work at LDF that was also focused on the African American community and the disadvantages that many communities of colors are facing, specifically with the pandemic. And as a result, the opportunity to come to UNICEF, especially at this pivotal moment, this pivotal time for our world, where we are able to, we've launched this major End the Pandemic campaign and really are vaccinating millions and billions of people across the world, and to be able to step into UNICEF at this moment was critical and important for me. So all of those influences from the personal as well as the professional, and more importantly, the important work that UNICEF is doing for specifically as at the intersection of health amidst this global pandemic, was one of the reasons why I came to UNICEF, but most importantly, my passion for children. And UNICEF works to support our programmatic efforts through fundraising, advocacy, and education. And we use and secure these crucial funds that are dedicated to increasing engagements for all Americans who care about the well-being of children and women and girls.
It's such important work, isn't it? Because the vulnerability of women and girls worldwide, and not always in countries we might describe as disadvantaged. It's the welfare everywhere. I was involved in a conversation, there was something on our television last night here in Australia talking about that disadvantage, and it's really, really quite shocking, isn't it? And everything that all of us can do, and I know Zonta plays a big part in that. Just before we move further on into the work that UNICEF does, what do you think out of that whole career history and professional and personal history to date, what do you think are the key elements that are underpinning your success as a leader in the philanthropic space?
I think it's the audacity to be bold. I think it's the audacity to have vision. When you're really thinking about being the head of a fundraising department, especially at this pivotal time, it really requires that you create the vision to inspire philanthropists to give. And I take that very, very serious in my role. What has been the underpinning has also been the level of support. You need a dynamic team behind you. And a team is not just only the staff, but more importantly, the boards, and more importantly, the supporters such as Zonta International. And it is getting everyone on the same page, making sure that we carefully and brilliantly articulate the impact of your philanthropic donors and to report back on your contributions.
So it's like you've had so much experience in so many areas of life that it seems to have just come together in that perfect storm, as they say, that perfect moment, and you're ready for this work at UNICEF.
Definitely. And I don't look at it as a storm, but it's sort of like a journey. And it may be a perfect storm, but all of those confluences, all of the struggles, it allows you to have that level of humanity. I can identify with a child who is in Africa or who is in India or who is in the Caribbean or even here in America, because I know what it means and what it feels to be other. I know what it means to often be marginalized, but despite that, someone believed in me. And the support that we were able to secure, the message that you send as Zonta International is that you are saying to these children, we see you and we believe in you. And if we can continue to fully lean into that, then I think we can really continue to accomplish even greater things than we have.
It's that you've expressed it just so clearly. It is, we need to have someone who believes in us. And I can only talk from the perspective of a woman, so I won't even attempt to do a comparison. But it seems to be really important. And with all the women I know and work with and touch base with, it is, that's a universal theme I hear, is having someone who believes in us. We don't need to have an advocate, although that helps, but it's that belief, isn't it? That true belief that I or you can crash through and break through or walk through or run through whatever it is that you need to do to be the person that you wish to be. So in a minute, we'll talk about what does that mean for young children, and I'm sure we'll get onto that in a moment when I ask you about your current role. But what does that mean for those of us who are mothers or grandmothers of children, of girl children right now, and particularly if they are children of colour? You know, I can't comment there either because I'm not, but it's that piece of, so what's the difference there and what is it we have to pay attention to? I think it's so important in the world of gender equality, which we're a long way away from, unfortunately.
We are. And just to add to that, Lynn, I think it's important to know that there are not too many Renees in the world, specifically that are leading fundraising organizations, specifically that are women of color. And I have, especially starting out at Sloan-Kettering, I have always been the only one. And we are now coming to a point where we're broadening the field, but it is important for us to acknowledge that. And more importantly, it is the individuals who, I remembered my great mentor, Anne McSweeney from Sloan-Kettering. I remember just talking to her and saying, you know, Anne, I think I can talk to just about anyone in the world. And she says, no, Renee, you can. And it is having someone like her who can mentor you and more importantly, see you for who you are and allow you to be authentic. And that has been one of the paths that I have been following, especially as I have evolved into this role, that it's important to bring your authentic self to the work. And there have been certain institutions or certain places that I've worked where I did not feel that I could be truly as authentic as I need to be. And therefore then I had to conform to what other looked like. And it was only then once I decided to step into myself, to own myself, that my career really took off at the level that it is. And it is, it's a journey.
That's a really interesting point in the authenticity and owning yourself. And that's about self-belief too, isn't it? Yes. Perhaps about, you know, how much I believe in myself rather than just other people believing in us. That's lovely. So I thought I'd just open the floor now to talk to us more about how UNICEF USA benefits children and exploring the impact of the partnership with Zonta International. So I think it would be remiss if I didn't ask that question, Renee, to give you that platform to talk about your work and also the intersect with Zonta International.
Yeah. So Zonta International's mission and works aligns very much with my personal journey as a woman, as I said, as a woman of color and a mother, with empowerment of women and girls, which is integral to the work that you and I do and what we believe in. In partnership with Zonta International, UNICEF and UNICEF USA are able to reach the hardest to reach women and girls through ensuring access to quality education, access to healthcare and mental health support, and work on global as well as a local scale to end child marriage. None of this would be possible without the philanthropic support of Zonta International. And together, our two organizations are working towards a day when gender equity is achieved on all levels. And part of when I talked about vision, I'm really beginning the formation of making sure that we really carve out a more robust girls and women's initiative at UUSA, and we will want to lean in and partner with Zonta International towards that effort to continue to build on the momentum that we have, as I mentioned, with 50 years of working together.
Yes, it's the history and the traditions there, and it's what does this now look like as we go further into what we call Zonta's second century, because as you know, we're in our second century and more than 50 years with UNICEF. So it's a really pivotal time, isn't it, for the work that we all do together.
Yes.
So as you and I and everyone listening today or watching today knows, Zonta International envisions a world in which women's rights are recognised as human rights and every woman's able to achieve her full potential. I'm really interested to hear your reflections on the current state of gender parity in our world and the steps that you think are needed to underpin the improvements that we all want, because the World Economic Forum's latest report indicates that closing the gender gap worldwide across all the indicators is, around 147 years away. So I'm wondering what your views are, particularly your personal views, but the views that you might share and talk about in the work that UNICEF does.
Definitely. Well, thanks to the partnership with Zonta, thousands of girls, for example, in Madagascar, have access to quality education. Thousands of adolescent girls are receiving access to healthcare and mental health services in Peru. In the last decade alone, 25 million child marriages were prevented. To date, nearly 8 million adolescent girls have been reached through life skills and school attendance support through the global program to end child marriage. There is so much more that needs to happen to close this gender gap, and the pandemic has only exacerbated the situation for women and girls. But I am grateful to have the opportunity to partner with organizations like Zonta International through the work that we're doing at UUSA, where we can work together to one day finally close the gender gap. And personally, the only way we're going to do that is myself, people like you, Lynn, people like all of the members of your organizations leaning into it, using our voice. And our voice could be, as I said, my voice from a very young age was to be persuasive. Other people have different types of voice, but all of those voices together and collectively can really send a resounding message that enough is enough and that we can lean into this moment.
It just feels like a collection of moments, doesn't it? Like I'm a little further down life's journey than you are, perhaps from an age perspective, Renee, unfortunately. And today, perhaps I feel a little bit further down. Feeling a bit weary after the travel and the work I've been doing. And I just think of it, and sometimes the weariness comes from, I think when I was younger and my generation was younger, we thought we'd be much further down the track of, and that's a very Australian expression, but much further down the track of achieve, or the pathway of achieving or getting closer to gender parity. And the COVID-19 pandemic has set a lot of things back, but it's opened a lot of doors too. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has opened a lot of doors, hasn't it, to maybe accelerate us there.
Yes.
But it's how smart we are in the world to pick up those open doors and try and push away the things that have taken us backwards. But I don't know whether you have any comments on that, but it's really quite challenging to look through to see which one of those doors we need to go to that have been opened in a positive way through the pandemic.
It is, but I think I don't just look at one of those doors, Lynn. I look at all of them, and we have to go through all of them, and we all have to decide which door we are going to enter in, specifically based on our position and where we show up in life.
Let's talk about young people for a little while, just for a short while, Renee. When I mentioned before I met your lovely daughter a little while ago, and we touched on what the world must offer to today's girls who are the women of the future. Can you share your thoughts on being the mother of this young girl who is the woman of the future? And what do you think is needed for a secure and fulfilled life for her and her friends and all the other young girls, no matter where they live, who are 8 years old in the world today?
Well, I look at my daughter's experience, especially through my eyes personally, but also through the eyes and the lens that I know the work that we at UNICEF are doing for young girls across the world, and her experience is totally different, different from mine and different from theirs. It's a life of privilege, just based on the opportunities that I've been able to pass on to her. But as a mother, I still struggle. The fact that she is an African-American child attending a wonderful private school, but with that comes a lot of challenges where she is still the only one in her specific group of classmates. And what does that mean? What does that mean? How do I allow her to see herself, create images that reflect and encourage her to be as phenomenal, to think that she's as beautiful and that she can do and achieve anything? So that's selfishly through my eyes as a mother, against the backdrop of everything that I am working to do professionally. Also against the backdrop of that I also show up in many spaces where I am still the only one who looks like me. I have grown into that. I'm, as you mentioned, getting up there in age. Next year, I'm so excited. I will be celebrating my 50th birthday, and I'm embracing it with every opportunity because I feel like I am becoming the woman that I was meant to be. And that has been a journey. But to go from an 8-year-old girl, whether she's here in Connecticut, or whether she is in Boston, or whether she is in Kenya, or in India, these girls sometimes can't see the world where they have the opportunity, or where they even have the vision to be something more than what's in front of them. When I think about the children in Afghanistan and the work that we're doing there, or the children in Haiti and those young girls, it gets to be overwhelming sometimes. But more importantly, I know that day in and day out, the programs that we have are making a difference. And most importantly, we are on the path to making it a more gender equitable society, but we have a long way to go. So I hope that answers the question. It's all coupled together. It's hard to separate the personal from the professional, especially at these points of intersections. But it's these intersections that lets us know that we're all humans, and it's the humanity and in each of us. And that if girls, we're allowing them to really reach their full potential and to step in and to be leaders, then I feel that we will be able to change this world in a whole different way. And I see that through the eyes of my daughter.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? We talk, and there's a lot of research that says education and of course health. Without health, we have nothing at all. Well, have less, I should say. And then education is important. We talk about that, but there are so many other things that sit beside health and education, aren't there? And you've covered those a little bit this afternoon where you are. So I'm really interested to go to the piece of the support and the help. And you mentioned earlier on the way through that you did have some mentors and people who worked with you when you were younger, and particularly in your early university days. What do you now reflect on as the power of mentoring, and do you get the opportunity to give back as a mentor as well in your current world or beside you?
Definitely. So I've had some tremendous mentors. As I mentioned, Anne McSweeney, who is, phenomenal as far as a successful fundraiser. Sherilyn Eiffel, who led or who is the leader of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, just being able to report into her, just taking the time to really take me under her wings. My mentors also are my family and my friends. My mom is the most important resource in my life, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And she has poured so much love into me. And I just wish if I could only pour half as much love into my daughter as her, but she has been a mentor and my best friend, who I met at Exeter Academy. And we've just been on a journey. Now she's a dean at Florida International University, and different people like that coming into your life is very important. I also believe paying it forward. I would not be here if it was not for these incredible mentors. And I've also had a lot of male mentors as well too, not just only female mentors, but the men in my life, such as Tom Hayford, who I mentioned, who introduced me to fundraising and asked me to lead an organization, is still very much a part of my life. And I pay it forward every day. So each opportunity that I get, for example, we had a wonderful event last week. We have a very young fundraiser who is 20 something. It was her first big event. She was so nervous, but she owned it. And just being able to talk to her before and after and acknowledge the job that she did, I could see that spark in her. And most importantly, it is important that we continue to do that to each other. So I do mentor individuals, especially my staff members, both informally and formally as well.
Thanks, Renee. And I think most women I speak to and men see the power of mentoring as really, really important at various stages in life. You know, sometimes we take someone forward with us all the way as that critical friend guide on the side. And sometimes we bump into people who are short-term mentors and help us with some part, or sometimes we don't even realize they've been a mentor until it's all done. So leadership's so essential in everything. And there's, you know, so much research, so much writing, so much thinking, so much thought leadership about leadership. So what are your leadership powers and gifts? And
that's a great question.
And how do you use these in your work and your life? So it's not meant to be a tricky question, but it's an interesting question.
It's a fascinating one. It's a remarkable question, Lynn, no pun intended. I said it's been an evolution, and what I am finding more important to this role of leading is really that authenticity that I mentioned. And I think that's one of my secret powers, because once I can really just be Renee, being Renee means being charismatic, but it also means being analytical. It also means asking tough questions. It also means giving direct feedback. It also means speaking truth to power. It also comes in so many different shapes, and you can be nice. I find sometimes people feel like they have to be mean to get results. And I feel like I can be nice, but I can be firm. I can show up and I can bring power, but I can also bring humility. And I think it's listening. As far as, you know, it wasn't always this way. That also took a lot of inner work. It also meant getting executive coaching. And I think sometimes we are too proud to ask for help. But I had a phenomenal coach who really stepped in when I was struggling with, you know, a team that I was managing. And I thought I was doing a great job communicating, because as I said, you know, I'm like a master communicator. I love to talk. But sometimes how it lands, what people hear, what your intentions are, and also being a teacher, people receive information in different ways, and how you learn and how you're able to grow and advance in your work also requires a different way of communicating to your staff members. And that was like a key role. So it's important to be concise. It's important to give positive but constructive feedback, and it's important to be there and be supportive. So I think those are some of my secret powers, but I would love to hear what my colleagues say about that as well.
In that dreaded 360-degree feedback, you know, that we ask people how they receive us, and then we take notice of that and go and have some coaching to sort it out and help us be a better leader. That's how it works, isn't it?
Yep.
in the professional space. So building on that, what are the 2 or 3 characteristics that you think the remarkable leaders, including yourself, have in common?
Well, Lynn, I have to be honest with you. I was totally floored that you asked me to be a part of this Remarkable Leaders series. Not because I don't think that I am remarkable or that I'm deserving. I just would never use that word to describe myself. But what I think they have in common is it's important to have a vision. It's important to be able to articulate that vision. And I think vision is not what's before you, but it is seeing something beyond. And if you can see what is beyond and, you know, come up with a new way, a new paradigm of doing business, building on the success. I feel sometimes we get stuck in doing what we know works, but there's also opportunities to do what we know works, but more importantly, to tweak it, to change it. And that's where vision comes into being. And that is something that I'm working on honing. And I've learned that from those visionary leaders that I've had the opportunity to work under and to be shepherded with their guidance.
It's I always say that the most visionary leaders are 2 or 3 years ahead of everybody else, and that's where they need to be. And maybe to pick up on a metaphor we used earlier, it's to find a way through all those open doors. The doors that keep opening before us, and which door at which time, and it'll help us meet that vision.
Yes, and to also pause and listen to the universe, because that can also guide you to finding which door or which path you need to go on.
And what is it we each do to listen and to regroup and to refresh and to have a mind that's clear to have those things happen? And that's that self-care, isn't it?
Yes.
I try not to talk about work-life balance, because in my thinking it's about self-care, and if self-care fits into life, then I'll have some form of balance. I'm not sure how you do that. So that leads me into tough challenges or roadblocks, the things that get in our way from time to time. In your world, have you had 1 or 2 of those, and how did you work it through? What are the skills or the way in which you work your way through those roadblocks, challenges, barriers, whichever word you'd like to use?
Yeah, well, obviously, you know, we all have faced these various roadblocks in life. I think one of them that really stands out, where I felt like I was at a fork in the road, and I had been, you know, fundraising for, I want to say 15, 18 years. And I felt like I was stuck, and where do I go? And as I said, sometimes you just have to speak to the universe. And I said, I'm a woman of faith. I believe in God. And I said, God, I'm going to go into this next job. And if this really allows me to be who I want to be and to be as successful as I know that I can, then I will stay on this journey. And that was when I was at the crossroads, when I went into my role at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And the rest is history, because once you put it to the universe and you are at that pivotal moment, do I want to stay in fundraising? Do I want to shift and pivot and do something else? But sometimes there is a calling, and I feel like we all have that calling. And sometimes it's important to just listen to what that is meant to be. And at that moment, it was a redefining moment for my career. It was at the intersection of policing reform, racial equity, voting, election protection, and being able to lead the fundraising program, as I said, along with my mentor, Sherilyn, and the tremendous team at NAACP Legal Defense Fund and to step into that specific moment, which then catapulted me into this role here at USA. But it's important when you're reaching those crossroads to either listen to yourself and look for guidance when you yourself can't find that guidance.
So when that confidence and resilience drops, as inevitably it does for most people, what do? What's your way through that?
I have a great network of friends. So even when I don't believe in myself, I surround myself with nothing but friends and family. And it is from them that I get inspiration. I think my confidence also is, from growing up in Barbados, and it was something that was placed in me from birth, where I always felt as a young child, I was destined for greatness. Whatever that greatness is, I always believed that I was here and that I had a purpose. And, growing up, I would sit on the beach and I would just imagine like what was on the other side of that horizon. And you just own it from a very young age. And if we are not giving those kids who are sitting wherever they're sitting, those little girls that are sitting with no home, no food, no access to education, access to healthcare, and that they can still believe with the power of UNICEF. This is what I love about this organization. Once they get that little, UNICEF cyan bag, those resources, those frontline individuals who I am proud to be a part of this wonderful organization, those individuals who show up to let them know somebody believes in you, then that is the opportunity that my roadblock is. It's so trivial based on what young girls are experiencing across the world.
That's a really, really optimistic way and positive way of looking at how you work your way through the things that get in your way or that come to challenge you. Thank you. So leaders that I know and leaders I've had anything to do with, they always have something they're reading, watching, or listening to. So what do you read or listen to or watch when you get a moment between being a parent and having friends and family and work? Well, what do you go to?
Well, that is very interesting. So I definitely have a lot of reading to do. At the end of the day, my homework is doing homework with my daughter, and it's reading many of her books. One of the things that I didn't share with you is that I also love to write, and I have started the process of writing my own children's book. And that is cathartic, and it is allowing me to, marry both the books that I'm reading through her eyes, and more importantly, to write and tell a different story as well. So it's a special little project that I'm secretly doing on my own.
Yes, we won't tell anyone that that's what you're doing. It's a bit like when people say to me, Lynn, how's your writing going? You said you were going to do this or this with that book. And I go, I'll just put it down to writer's block, or finding the time to do it. Yes, I'm with you. Yes, writing's high on my list of how do you capture the things that interest you. And so in your case, it'll be, I hear it's probably writing stories for children so they can see themselves and they can see what they want to be. Would that be one of the ways you're going?
That is the way I'm going, Lynn. Definitely. Definitely.
It's that, because it is very important, circling all the way back to children and vulnerable children and our children. If they can't see what they want to be, they have to see what they want to be.
Yes.
We all had to be able to see someone doing that work or being that person we want to be. So in order to wrap, I have a couple of questions sitting in the waiting box over here. But before we get to that, what's next, Renée? The next few years, goals, ambitions, what do you think you can achieve to get that uplift of the power of your voice? Because you've talked about, having that charismatic approach, being authentic and a powerful voice. And I hear that in you, a very powerful voice. So what's next? How do you get the next lift?
The next step for me is to really lean into my role at UNICEF USA. Specifically, I just started in March. There is so much work to be done, as I mentioned, just the pandemic, our work around the pandemic, but also just our myriad of key initiatives that we have across the globe. It's important that we really lean into that. So I am very fired up about what's next, specifically for my team and the work that we're looking to do. I'm also very interested in continuing to forge relationships with our deep partners, such as Zonta, and many individuals, as well as organizations, corporations, and foundations who are partnering with us, and also expanding that field. I think it's important that we reflect our donor base, also reflects the communities that we serve. So part of my strategy will also be expanding our philanthropic diaspora and making sure that we have all different types of individuals engaged in the work that we're doing, because then I feel like we would be able to not only have the philanthropic donors, but we would also be able to have the advocacy and the communities behind us if we're engaging. So I'm really excited about that. And then personally, I'm just, this weekend, I am going to be celebrating my daughter's birthday.
Yes.
And I will be, having my best friend who's flying up from Barbados to be with me. And it will be the first time that I actually have the opportunity to be with family and friends in a meaningful way. So just cherishing those small moments as well. When you talk about, how do you have that work-life balance, it's important that we, especially coming out of this global pandemic, well, we are, but many people across the world aren't, being very conscious of that, being able to have the vaccine here in America, but I also know that that's not across the world. And I am on a mission to partner with USA and for our team to be able to continue to vaccinate more of the world, and those healthcare, those frontline individuals, but then we also have children and the impact that is going to happen. And what is the next phase? I'm always an educator at heart. And how are we going to recover from this pandemic? And how are our kids and our girls and even our boys, how are they going to have a new reimagined way of learning and thriving and bringing their full selves to this world? That's what I'm leaning into.
Thank you.
But I also,
sorry. Yeah, no, you go.
And more importantly, just, to continue partnering specifically with Zonta International. And as I said, to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the most vulnerable women and girls around the world. Families and communities will not lift themselves out of poverty unless women and girls are given access and equal opportunities. And I will continue fighting for this. And I'm going to fight with you, Lynn. I'm going to fight with all of your colleagues because I know together we will continue supporting our partnerships towards this end.
We won't get a lift in the world unless we lift women to empower them. And it's coming all the way back to that word that's so strong in the Zonta organization about empowering. And empowering comes from education, it comes from meaningful work, and it comes from seeing what you want to be or seeing what is possible, doesn't it? What else do you think a Zonta member like myself, I'm a member of a club in Toowoomba here in Toowoomba Garden City in Queensland. There are, 25, 28,000 members across the world. What is it as individuals you think we can best do? If there was one thing we could all do, what would it be to add value to those girls and boys we're talking about?
Lynn, just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, you all are a part, as I expressed, this 50-year history. And the way that you've been able to have impact is by working together. And you're not only working together as an organization, you're not only working together within your communities, but then you're partnering with UNICEF to further advance. And if we can just multiply that, whether it is, through our professional organizations, through our work, that camaraderie, partnering together is how we will be able to do this.
Thank you so much, Renee. I have a couple of questions. One came in a little while ago from Mita, and it says, it refers back to, let me go back to the question, there it is. It refers back to when you were talking about being a woman of colour and being a child, and you made reference to feeling as an other. And Mita's really interested to know what caused you mostly to feel like that other.
I think other for me meant I felt other when I moved from Barbados to America, specifically moving from Barbados to Los Angeles. I had a different accent. I had a different way of living. Definitely didn't have a lot of West Indians. So even being Black on the outside in a predominantly, African-American community, I felt other. Other than changed, and it shifted, especially when I started to go into different spaces where you're walking into a room and you're literally the only African-American in the entire sea of 400 to 500. You stand out. And it doesn't mean that I didn't feel good about myself. But it definitely makes you pause and say, well, why is this? Why are other people given the opportunities for access? And specifically with philanthropy, philanthropy is about giving unto others and extending who you are. And I think there are lots of people who are like me, who are very philanthropic in service. What are those systems? What are those experiences that people have where they are able to give back? And that has been really a major part of the work that I really want to focus in on, because UNICEF is not just about changing lives or not about making sure that girls don't feel other. Is really about breaking down those systemic barriers that are placed in our lives, structurally, education, governmental. Those are the structures that I am leaning into, trying to make sure that, there are other people who don't have to feel other.
Yes, for those of us, for some of us, we don't often go through that experience. So it's so important to hear the stories and the depth of feeling. It's happened to me when I've travelled, just in moments, but not as part of my life. So thank you for sharing so deeply about that, because it helps bring a little more understanding to everyone who listens to you speak. And the last question before we wrap up, Renee, Daniela asked, do you think your personal and professional life would have been different had you not moved to a different country at a young age? Maybe not. Barbados is phenomenal in the fact that, so many of my family and friends have gone on to have amazing professional careers, both locally as well as globally. I think my story is somewhat unique in the fact that, I've probably traveled into a new space that many people don't go in, specifically as far as philanthropy coming from Barbados, but that doesn't negate the experience. So it's hard to say. Everybody has a different journey. We all are here and we're all going to go through the ebbs and flows. I think had I not had the early investment in my education in Barbados, which has one of the highest literacy rates in the world, had I not had that foundation, when I'm really thinking about my daughter, when we're talking about reading, it's the early foundations. If we're not investing in kids at the get-go, when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, so that they have those foundations where they have the literacy skills, it is imperative that that allows them to chart a different course. And I know that that course profoundly was shaped by my experience being in Barbados, so that when I
moved to America, I was advanced. I was skipped a year just based on the tremendous education that I received there.
Yes, so that's lovely. Thank you so much for that. Have you got a few words to leave with our audience today? Some people are going into the end of their day, some are in the early hours of the morning, and some of us are just starting our day. So what's your message for everyone today, Renée?
My message, Lynn, is it doesn't matter what time of the day it is, whether you're waking up. I have a morning routine. My morning routine centers around my schedule, but it also centers around my daughter. It ends around my daughter. Some of you probably have kids who are older, younger, no kids at all. It is really finding out what is that part of your day that is motivating you to be who you are and who you were meant to be. For me, that means waking up, making sure that she's sent off into the world to thrive, but also the other major part of my day is to make sure that the millions of children that we are working and serving and fighting for also get as much love and as much TLC that I pour into her. I also bring that passion and commitment to my job. So it's finding your space, whatever that is, and making sure that you pour as much of yourself into your journey in life. And if you're going to sleep, then have a great night. And most importantly, wake up with a new and refreshed dream.
Thank you, Renée. What a lovely thought. And in the words of Sally, who's put in the chat here, Sally has said, Renée's a dynamic leader and we are fortunate to have her as a collaborator through UNICEF USA. What better words could I use? I thank you so much for your generosity of time today in your world, which is incredibly busy. November has turned into a very busy month, I know, in UNICEF USA and for Zonta International. So I thank you sincerely. And I know you have some webinars and events coming up, as does Zonta. The next big Zonta webinar event's on the 30th of November, which is the Zonta Says No Forum. And I will just bring that to the attention of everyone today, that you'll find it and they can register. And this is our last Remarkable Women, Powerful Stories conversation for 2021. Sometime in December, and I'm not sure when, I'm going to be doing a short retrospective of the year. It'll just be a video that we'll put out on YouTube or wherever the lovely Megan and Kate decide it should go. And the guest list for the first half of 2022, we'll make that known to people as soon as we've secured all of our guests. The first webinar for 2022 will be on the 13th of January, most likely in the afternoon Chicago time. However, that will depend on the guest for January. So I really look forward to re-engaging with everyone in January around Remarkable Women and Powerful Stories. And we'll keep some articles and stories floating between now and then, just to keep you interested and to keep you wondering about who's coming next as our guest. So once again, thank you, Renée. And all of our recordings are on YouTube and they're also available on the zonta.org website under News and Events. So if you've missed any, please go back and watch them and pass them to your friends. And thank you for your engagement this year in this, what I think is an amazing series. And Renée, I know it's Thanksgiving next week coming upon you in the USA. So enjoy that family time and the precious time that I know Thanksgiving brings. And I wish you and your friends, because I won't be on air again for a little while, a very thoughtful and relaxing festive season and into 2022. And I hope our paths cross again.
They will, Lynn. Thank you so very much for your leadership and for your time here tonight. And to all of you, again, on behalf of USA and UNICEF, we really are indebted to you as an organization for your commitment for almost 50 years. And we're looking forward to another 50 years. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a nice evening. Bye.